Seth Travis. I'm a creative director here in New York City and also founder of Man of Metropolis and Metropolis Report. Today's guest is musician Rose Betts.
Why be unhappy when you could just hold me whenever you like? I know that you're taken, but your body's saying maybe not tonight. And oh, nobody need know the places we go when our eyes lock in. Can something this strong be something so wrong? Be something so wrong, you'll do the right thing. Go back to your baby. Try to erase me. Why should I be lonely here at this party?
Hi, everybody. I'm Seth Travis with Man of Metropolis, and today we're talking to Rose Betts, a singer-songwriter based in London. You might have discovered her already with her cover of Song of the Siren on Zack Snyder's Justice League, but she also has a couple of other tracks you can find on Spotify and SoundCloud and a few projects, it sounds like, that are coming out any day now. So we're here to talk about all the things that she's worked on in the past. Obviously, this huge moment for her in her career with the Zack Snyder Justice League soundtrack and some of the music that she's coming out with very soon. Rose, thanks for joining us today.
My total pleasure.
Where are you based right now?
I'm from London, and I've been in London for the majority of my adult life, but I moved to Scotland to stay with my twin sister for a little while all this crazy stuff was happening, and I just wanted to be out in nature, and I got a visa to go to America, so everything's shut, so I'm just kind of waiting here. So yeah, I'm actually in the north of Scotland in the Highlands.
Okay, amazing. Well, we're excited to talk to you about what you're up to. I think you have a new single coming out on Friday.
I do. Yeah, I'm super excited. Yeah, my single Recovery. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I wanted to kind of just sort of kickstart our conversation today with your background and, what it was like growing up for you and when you discovered music, and if you had any specific musical influences that sort of have maybe impacted or influenced your voice and your style and your songwriting.
It's a big question. I have a really musical, artistic family. My dad is an actor, my mum was a musician and a dancer and a teacher. So we kind of absorbed it from a very young age. We were all taught to sing together. There's quite a few kids, there's 4 kids, so that there's like a big choir of us. And but also because there were so many children, it was I could come my little world and be in control of it. And so then I just basically I started writing songs from the age of about 12 and didn't stop, and just thought, I'll do that because it feels like the nicest thing. And my influences were just I had a lot of classical music growing up, but then some like UK bands like Keane and Coldplay and Muse and the Doves and weird stuff that actually you wouldn't have thought would have influenced me, but actually their songwriting styles have really influenced me a lot. Stuff like that. And in terms of vocally, I think at one point I started singing in a bit of an American accent when I was about 15, and my dad kind of, what are you doing? So then from that age, I was kind of very conscious of trying to find a unique voice and trying to make sure that I didn't fall into the trap of sounding, when you pick up influences, it's really easy to pick up influences as a musician because that's kind of how it works. But you've got to kind of play with that balancing act of being influenced but really having your own voice. So I think that's kind of behind my voice and its development. That's kind of a boiled down file.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it's interesting you talk about, you were maybe toying with changing the way that you sang as a teenager. I think a lot of times with music, and especially pop music, you can kind of see like one emerging artist can impact like a whole generation of singers. Obviously,
Yeah.
Christina Aguilera is a really good example of a time where kind of everyone was maybe like, I don't want to say over singing because not everyone has the Christina Aguilera voice, but you sort of saw that trend, maybe Christina and like Pink. And then obviously Amy Winehouse and Adele had sort of a certain sort of retro throwback style that maybe impacted a lot of other singers and their journey and finding their voice. Is there an album or is there a singer or even a song that you feel like has really impacted or influenced your approach to the way you sing?
Ah, good question. I totally get you regarding all these things. It's really interesting. I'm looking forward to all the Billie Eilish
Oh yeah,
that are going to happen. Yeah.
true.
I think, yeah. I mean, for me, it's about choice. I really liked people like Etta James or Nina Simone who could do anything at any point, but they saved it for a particular point in the song. They didn't give it to you in the first 4 bars. So I think, I mean, I can't think of a particular song, but if their kind of approach, which was to save the kind of thing that makes your voice really extraordinary for the point where it will hit in the right time. In that, yeah, it's interesting. It's very easy, like the Christina Aguilera thing. I mean, I could never sing like her even if I tried. So, but she can do anything with her voice, and it's all, yeah, it is all about, for me it's all about when, and it's really also about tone and about stripping back as much as possible and letting the song do the talking and never getting in the way of that. I don't know, I can't really think of a really good example. I mean, I grew up with like Pink and Avril Lavigne and Dido and quite a variety of different singers. I really like male singers. I think people like Keane and that they didn't do a lot of vocal trickery. They just sung the songs. But it's a bit of everything. I mean, in Songs of the Siren, there is definitely vocal trickery going on. There's the kind of trills and the kind of Celtic infused breaks, and so I suppose I've got those kind of in my arsenal, and it's just a question of when I use them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. One of the songs I'd love to talk about first that you've done is Rocket.
Oh yeah.
And also the music video, which is a whole other topic in itself. But talk us through Rocket, talk us through the songwriting and the recording, and then we'll talk the music video.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Thank you for listening to it. It's so nice. Yeah, the song was funny. It's songs come in different ways. So sometimes a song can just fall into your lap and you kind of think someone else has written it. So you write it and you kind of go, I'm sure I'm going to hear that someone else has already written this song. And Rocket was a bit like that. It kind of felt, I was living in London in an old brewery, which was awful because there were rats everywhere. And I remember it was just awful, and just being at this point of like, I need to get out of here. And I think the song just kind of happened in that time, in that moment. And now I think about it, a lot of songs that I wrote it at the time. So I think it kind of came from a living in this really kind of hard, not very nice place to live, and then kind of writing this very escapism song. And then I kind of didn't take it very seriously. I wrote it and thought it was a bit of a joke song and not really worth doing anything with. And I sent it to my dad and he really loved it. And he's always my first critic and harshest critic. So yeah, and then I played it to some of the label that I have in America and they really loved it. So it turned into a thing, even though I never saw it in that light.
Yeah, it's like really playful.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know "Song of the Siren" is a cover, and is it "Orange Tree"? Is that the right title?
Orange Trees, yeah, that's another one.
I just think there's a lot of sort of like intimate, sort of heartfelt, kind of gutsy, reflective songs that you do. But Rocket was like very light and happy and cute, and then of course the music video takes it to another kind of level. Talk a little bit about the idea or the inspiration with the music video.
The idea for that came from when they said, well, let's put that out as a single. I needed to write a middle eight, like, a little bridge. And what's lovely about bridges is that you can often do something really interesting with the meaning of the rest of the song. So you can kind of flip it on its head, or there's a lot of power in a bridge to change the feeling of the whole song actually. And because I wrote this bridge, which then at the time all this stuff has been going on in the environment, and in the bridge I turned it into a bit of that angle of just switching the make up your mind lyric in terms of actually going back and, you know, this place that we have and we're not looking after our home. And so from that bridge, the idea for the music video grew. And stop motion has been something I've done a couple of times, and it's the most back-breaking way of making a music video, but it just felt really right for the playful nature of the song, but also to subvert everything that I was saying with images that looked like they were playful but actually were a bit more serious if you looked a bit closer. And I think I like things that have that kind of payoff, that if you're the kind of person who will really listen to the lyrics and really watch something, you'll get a different experience than someone who might not pay as much attention. But not to say that one's better or worse, but just that there is something for all different sorts of people, and that if you want to listen to it in that way, you can actually hear a bit more.
Absolutely. Is there a song that you have recorded that is just like you personally, it's kind of like your first child, you know, like your favorite, and why?
Oh my Lord. Is there a favorite? I don't think that I have. I don't have. I mean, the single that's coming out this week is a kind of song that it felt like it came from a necessity of I had to write it to get through something, but it's not the kind of song that I would listen to, even though when I hear it, it feels one of the purest sort of, that's really who I am and what I felt in that moment song. I tend to listen to just the newest thing that I've done. I don't know. I don't have I don't get incredibly attached to songs in like a mother-child way. I feel like as soon as you've written them and they're out, they kind of belong to everyone else, because then you start hearing people's reactions to it. And I once wrote this song that was about me and my twin, and then this person came to me and said, it's definitely about depression. And I was like, oh wow, I think that says more about you than it does about me. And that interesting thing about how people take songs. So yeah, I don't have a favorite. I have some that are important to me in terms of they mark a change in my songwriting, and this song that's coming out definitely marks a change in my songwriting, and a kind of like choosing to go a bit deeper than I'd ever gone before, and allowing the audience into that, because that's always something that you wrestle with as an artist, is how much do you let people in, because it's obviously you make yourself extremely vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. So flipping that question on its head and taking it to a live scenario, I know it's been a really strange year. But if you're like any musician I know who actually has a great voice and is also a musician, you thrive on performing to audiences, or for audiences. Is there a song that is like your favorite song to maybe close out your set or open your set?
Yeah, I have. I know it's been so long since I performed. I think it's lovely if depending on the size of the audience. I really like intimate gigs. I like it when you can kind of almost see everybody there, and you can kind of really feel the audience's response. When you do bigger gigs, there's quite a big separation between you and the audience, and it's almost like you have to play for yourself. So I like it when I can get people to be involved, I suppose. So I have a song that's called Lions, which has a very easy and uplifting chorus, and I love ending on that song because then I can get people to sing along with me, and that is just the most beautiful thing, is when you hear a whole like group of people that maybe haven't heard the song before suddenly singing together to you. I mean, it seems a bit selfish almost to kind of force them to do it just so that I kind of have this lovely kind of payoff, but I really like ending with Lions. I think I like starting with songs that are quite raw and a little bit like you kind of Siren, or something that shocks people out of their day and takes them into the different stories that I'm going to be telling them. Yeah, so I tend to start with more raw songs. Just almost like a kind of shock thing tactic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you can play a live venue again, do you have like, oh, I can't wait to go back here and do a performance at this bar or this stage or this club or this garden?
Oh, I would love to do a performance in kind of a church venue. There's a few in London that I know. There's actually one, I found a venue near me here, but I can't imagine I'm going to get very many people here because no one lives up here. I think I'd like to go somewhere that felt really natural. So outside is nice, but mainly I think I'd like to find somewhere that had beautiful acoustics and just had a lot of space for everybody in it and wasn't too crammed. I love bars and I love all that kind of thing, but I think at the moment, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Going to be interesting going back to gigging, and I'm sure it's going to be ages until it's actually normal again. But I think I would love to just be somewhere that feels completely almost magical, somewhere really magical, to kind of give us all a reward for all of this time we've had to spend not living fully and not breathing in the arts as we kind of really need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's talk about it. I want to hear, as much as you can share with us with your experience working with Zack Snyder on the Justice League, and obviously the song that you did for the film, for the re-release of the film, the kind of fully imagined version of Justice League. I guess first off, are you a comic movie fan, and have you seen Man of Steel and Batman v Superman before you ever heard from Zack Snyder and his people?
No, I am a fan of comic book film. I'm not a purebred in any way. I didn't grow up with comics; they weren't around. And I have friends that did have them, but I never entered my world really. And I didn't know. I mean, I knew a bit more about the Marvel side of things. I don't know, for some reason DC just didn't filter into my life in the same way. Even though I grew up watching like Batman films, and I've definitely been very aware of, the Christian Bale Batman films and all those kinds of things. And I'm aware of the difference of tone between Marvel and DC, and I'm really interested in that. And I really like the artistic potential that is in DC. I think for me, it's a little bit more interesting. So yeah, I didn't know anything, and I also didn't know anything about release the Snyder Cut. I didn't know anything about the campaign.
Oh wow,
was totally oblivious. I mean, because it's funny, if you're not. I have friends that were just, when I told them about the project, their minds exploded. But because I didn't know going in, well, I didn't know what film it was when I made the demo anyway. But it was when I found out, and then I started researching, I suddenly realized, oh my God, this is such a story. This is so big for so many people, and quite a pivotal shift in terms of the power of the fans. And nothing's happened like this before in cinema.
It's pretty historic. If we can kind of like do a timeline for our viewers, was this a song that you had recorded 4 years ago for the original Justice League? This was something that came up over the last year?
Yeah, so I wonder, I've had that question. I don't know if, I imagine that Zack had this song in mind for this scene when he originally created everything, but obviously then everything got shelved. So in July, I got an email from an editor who worked on the film that I know, and she said that she kind of messaged me just saying, we've got this film, we've got this scene in it that has this song that we need versions of, and I thought of you because I think at that point they'd already been through quite a few different singers and they'd been through quite a few versions. They weren't finding it, and so they was kind of opening it up to way more artists, and I happened to be one of them. And so then I within about 3 days, I had never heard the song before at all. So it was really kind of quick. The whole thing was quite quick. So I had to listen to the song, listen to the versions, and then create my own version. And in about 3 days, I'd sent off the demo, which actually, apart from the addition to strings, there's very, very little change between that demo that I made and the final version. Strings are a huge change, but in terms of everything else.
And this is all just in July. It's like, get us a demo, send it to us.
Yeah, that all happened in July. And then I heard nothing until December. So then from July, they had my version, and they were getting other versions in and debating who to go with, and it took until December for them to decide on my version. And then it took within a month, then like a month later, well, not even that, maybe then by January the 8th, 7th, 8th, we had recorded the film version. So it was kind of like they spent all this time debating, and I didn't know what was going on at the time. I didn't know what film it was. I'd kind of forgotten about it. And then from the moment it was like a yes, it was a very, very quick turnover.
Wow. So July, you get this email, and then, I mean, with your demo and your submission of your demo, is it a situation where it's just radio silence till December, or do you get like a crumb from the editor where they're like, we're listening, your top 10, your top 3, like anything, or was it just silence?
Well, it was, I mean, usually the silence is the deafening side of all things that you kind of, one sends off. These things come up, opportunities come up like this. Nothing like this has ever come up.
Okay.
But I've had things where people have solicited demos for this, or you've sent your things to this, and then you just silence, and you're just like, well, that's dead. She messaged me in September, I think, saying, as far as I know, they haven't chosen anybody. I think they're still looking for people. And so at that point, I was kind of like, well, that sounds like, and I think that they wanted someone, because I'm fairly unknown, I think they thought that they wanted someone who was a bigger name. And I think that might have been the label. I think that might have been Warner's side of it. They kind of wanted maybe to bring in someone who had a bit more of a following, or I don't know. I wasn't sure really what was going on. And at that point, when I kind of heard the whiff of that, I thought, well, see you later. So at September, I kind of thought, well, yeah, who knows? Because I think that a lot of this happened. It's really interesting. I think there's so many, and as we know in films, there are so many people involved.
Right.
And the editor actually have all the power. But I think that my version kind of continued to stay there the entire time, and they just were finding other versions to see if it was better or worse than it, and they never found one that was better. So I think I just kind of survived the entire time.
It's crazy.
So only one time.
It's crazy to think that you were like the benchmark. I don't know how it works. Like if they're texting or text messaging a link to your song to producers and PAs and Zack and Zack's wife and everyone's just constantly going back to your song. And then is it a call or is it an email in December? I forget what you said.
It's a call. The editor called me and she was super excited, and she called me on a Saturday night when I just had been having like a nice relaxed evening, having a couple of glasses of something, and initially I'd just been nominated for a Grammy, so I thought she was just ringing to congratulate me on that. And then she told me that I got the gig, and then it was kind of like, the Americans, they'll be in touch with you soon, just look out for the call. And then they didn't call for a week. So in that time I was like, well, it's off, it's not happening. It's not gonna, and it's so interesting. There are so many ups and downs to the whole thing. And I remember going for walks, because I live really near the sea here, and just like seeing all the waves come in and thinking of the song, which being like it was, and what a big deal it was. It was a real roller coaster.
You were, unfortunately, with our internet connection, there's going to be a couple of little breaks and pauses, but that's just par for the course with technology. So you were walking along the ocean for that week of silence after that Saturday night call. And how are you feeling?
Just, I kind of, what was so interesting, because obviously the song is about the sea, and it was just this, it was almost like it was, not taunting me, but just this thing of now that I knew what film it was, because when the editor rang me, she said it's Justice League, and then I looked up everything and I realized what a big deal it was and how amazing it would be if it happened. It was pretty excruciating, just this kind of week of silence, having heard yes and then going, did they mean yes? And then I heard from them a week later, and then it was, then I got a call from the producers, and eventually then I talked to Zack, and
And so going into the final recording, right, which is the edit we've all heard, and I think I've played 200 times since today, at least. I said to my husband, I said, if we haven't been married yet, this would be like the song that we played at our wedding. So I'm like, I'm campaigning to anybody that I know who's getting engaged. Like, I have the perfect song for you for your wedding.
I've had a few people that are having it for their wedding. I've even been invited to one of the weddings now.
Oh, there you go. So you are going to the recording studio in January to get like your final cut in, and obviously like being contacted in July, and then in September, and then in December, you kind of have, and to your point, like you live by the ocean, the irony of the song is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Just for people who maybe aren't musically inclined or understand the creative process of doing a recording of a song, whether it's a cover or an original, and then obviously taking in all the notes and the feedback from the editor. And it sounds like you even spoke to Zack and got feedback from him. Can you kind of just share with us the feedback and what the day was like in the studio, and how you wrapped the final recording?
Yeah, sure. Everything's different with each different scenario of a song. So when I talked to Zack, and it was such a nice conversation, because I really got a strong sense of how he felt about my version and what he didn't want to change, which was basically everything. He just felt that strings would be beautiful on it.
Okay.
He didn't want anything different with my delivery. He wanted to keep, there's a thing in the industry called demo love, which is when people fall in love with the first version of something they hear. But often that first version may have been like, I recorded it in a space like this. It was just recorded in my room on, my stuff, which is not super high tech. And so you're kind of always in competition with this pure thing that you created, and getting back to that can be very hard. So that was definitely the hardest part of it, especially because Zack had made it so clear that he didn't want anything to change from something that I'd recorded 6 months ago. So because there's two versions for the film, when I sent my demo off, they chopped it up and elongated certain sections of it so that it would fit the film in the way that they wanted. And going in, we weren't sure how, because then, so now we had this kind of version, which was the film version, which obviously has its own timing, and I hold that note for that long, and we weren't sure how specific it had to be. Like, could it be that I could say that word then and then this one then, or do I have to say the word hands at that time? And fortunately, the editor was present for this session, and she said, oh yeah, at that point there's a picture of his hands, even though in the final edit that didn't happen. And I didn't get to see the scene until everybody else.
Oh wow.
Zack didn't want anything to get in the way, I don't think, of the version that I created. I think he thought that it was, what I'd done was good enough. He didn't want to kind of filter anything into it. So there was that side of it. So first thing we did was let me go back a bit. So when I recorded the song, I recorded it just straight into my computer with a piano at the same time. So usually when you record, you have a click track in your head and you lay down the piano part, and then you sit and you focus on doing the vocal. But because of the nature of the song and how much space I felt it needed, I just kind of sung it live, and therefore it didn't have a click track, so it didn't have a beat that would be easy to follow. So that made it super hard for the strings. But they prioritized my piano in a separate studio while everyone else was in the kind of main one. And I laid down a couple of takes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
we had a little bit of a freeze moment. So
no worries, the wind, I think, in Scotland.
Rewind a second and kind of go back to the portion where you're talking about the click track and the free form singing and then the strings being able to come in?
Yeah, so because of what made the song so like beautiful was the fact that there was nothing holding it in place. It was free. So that's all very well if you're singing live with an orchestra at the same time, but it's not when you're singing in different parts at different times. It's very hard. So I went in and played live with the vocals like in the morning of the session, which so it took about a couple of hours, which was quite pressured because you've got all these people there and you know the strings are coming in, and I don't think I've rehearsed a song so much in my life ever. I got to the point where I was like, I don't think I can ever sing this song again because I knew how much they loved the demo. I knew every single bit of every choice that I was making in that vocal. So I knew it inside and out, and it really helped having done all that pre-work when I went in and being able to do it in quite a kind of short amount of time. So there was enough time for them to then create a click track, which is a bit of which I suppose is a bit confusing. I'd never seen it happen before, but it's like when they create they took my beat, my rhythm basically, and found a way of creating a click to that the strings would be able to follow, which must have been a nightmare, but they made it look really easy. So then so I did all that, and then the strings came in and made it sound a whole ton of pretty. And there's even, no one has noticed this actually, but there's an electric guitar in it. It's really soft. It's I tried to show my sister and she couldn't hear it. It's a really soft element. But that was laid on afterwards, and we just created some kind of soft kind of like, I don't know, crescendo sounds coming in at the end. I don't know if that answered your question, sorry.
No, it's great. You know, I'm sort of just trying to like visualize it because it just sounds like such an incredible day for you as a singer and an artist. So were you when you were in the studio recording your portion of vocals, the strings came in the afternoon to do that part. So I'm assuming you're in like the sound room watching the strings like lay their part out. I'm just curious, going back to the feedback from the editor who's there in the studio that day, but also your call with Zack, like, did you have like a piece of paper with the lyrics? Well, at this point you said you had sang it so much, you probably had the lyrics memorized, but did you have a piece of paper with you on your music stand, like with words that Zack shouted to you on the phone, or like annotations that the editor and Zack kind of gave you for your delivery of the song? I'm just curious if you had those types of things just staring at you like all morning long.
Zack gave me no feedback on changing anything about the way that I sung. He just said, do what you did. So the only thing that I really held with me was that when I first heard about this project from the editor, I think I said, have you got any more details about the scene, just so that I can figure out what's trying to be said in this moment emotionally. Right. She gave me this very short 2-line description of this sense of it's this really romantic moment happening between these two people, and it's happening in slow motion. And in that little kind of snippet of hers, I think that's what I kind of held with me constantly the entire time, because it was really everything that she gave me, even though it was so small, it was enough. It had been enough to create what then got the job. So I was kind of, that's the key is in that little bit that she gave me. Yeah. So that is it. When I was singing the song and when I was recording it for them, that is what I held in me. I kind of kept looking back at it and referring to it and making sure that I was holding that in the performance. So yeah, that I had that, but nothing from Zack, apart from just do what he did.
That's amazing. So you've submitted, or the studio, the editor has submitted your final version in January to, is it Watchtower Records, or I forget?
Yeah.
Water Tower Records. And then you're in Scotland with family. And so when do you finally get to hear your final version with the movie or without the movie? Kind of walk us through like to the finish line of when it's finally launched and it's with the movie and the movie is live and you can listen to it on Spotify.
Well, so I'm a co-producer on the track, so I was there for the entirety of every part of the recording. So because I always produce my own vocals, and I was part of, there was kind of a few edits that happened with the strings. There were some bits that were taken out, and then I was part of how the guitar panned out. So because of that, I managed to, at the end, say, can I have a version? So I managed to get a version, a really raw file that is basically the same thing as what everyone else heard. So I did have a version that I could listen to, which was obviously I couldn't share with anybody, but
Yeah.
I might have, played it to a couple of members of the family, but that was it. And then it was basically silence. It was nothing until everybody else. It was the 18th. And then I was kind of watching, well, when is it going to come out? Because when I recorded it, they didn't have a release date at that time, so I wasn't sure when it would be out. And I heard it. Well, I'd already heard it, but I heard that version when everyone else did, and the same thing with the film. I saw it when everyone else did.
And did you do you have HBO Max in Scotland, or how did you access? Did they send you the movie like on a private link, or?
I wish. No, we have, they distribute it through a thing called Now TV, which is like a UK thing. We don't have HBO Max. I think it was also, it was on Sky as well. So yeah, I just watched it but I actually watched it a day later because I watched it on Friday just so that we can have a really nice night. But so it was really hard to avoid seeing like clips of it because people were starting to send me things in it, and
oh right,
I didn't want to see it like the scene on its own. I wanted to see it in the context of the film.
You were patient even as this person who sang a demo in July and waited till January to record the final one, and then waited another 2 months to see it. You're like, I'm going to watch this movie straight through and see your part just appear.
Yeah, I wanted to see it in the context of the film. I didn't want to. Yeah, I love films like that, so I didn't want to ruin the surprise just for the payoff of just seeing, like, hearing the moment. And I seen clips of it, and because I knew what scene it was over vaguely, when I saw adverts for it, I was like, oh yeah, it must be that scene where the slow motion thing's happening.
Yeah.
I waited an extra day. I even created more time so that I could have the full experience. And I'm really glad I did, because it was nuts seeing it in context of the film. I was really caught off guard by it.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously before the footage of our interview, I kind of shared with you my experience with that scene, but for DC comic or even Marvel fans, these are comic book movies. There's a lot of action. There's obviously costumes and crazy VFX sequences. And this scene with Barry Allen and Iris West there's obviously tons of visual effects involved in order to create this moment, but your song plays over this scene. And it's, at least in Zack Snyder's world of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and now Zack Snyder's Justice League, this is, I think, the first romantic scene that he's filmed in his sort of world for the DC universe. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you feel in that moment? And, hearing yourself in the song that has sort of, been a long journey for you to see in March finally, but also just the actual actors and the scene and what's happening on screen. What was going through your mind?
It was crazy. It was mad, because I think it's like you said, I've never seen a song in a film that has been so like pronounced. When you hear of people getting their songs on films or in the back, it's great, but you never expect it to be so much, this like everything else to go completely quiet and it to be so focused on that song. And so I'd never seen a scene like it, so I was completely thrown by it. And when I first heard it, it sounded like I'd put it in. It sounded like I'd just got the raw files of the film and just like eradicated all the audio at that point and just like plonked my song in, because it just sounded so odd to hear myself in this context. It kind of took me out of it the first time I watched it. I had to watch it again to, I think, experience it a bit more like everyone else. It was amazing. It was quite shocking, I think, only because of it being, I didn't expect it to be such a prominent part of the scene. One wouldn't have dreamt that as a singer-songwriter. That kind of a like to be so prominent in something so big, it just doesn't happen normally. That's not really how it works. So it's still hard to get my head around that still.
I think it's what makes the song even more powerful in that scene is, like you said, it was unexpected, you know, especially even for Zack, where he was usually working with, you know, Hans Zimmer or Junkie XL. And, you know, you might hear a song with lyrics by an artist in a trailer of his, but a lot of times, I mean, outside of maybe Watchmen, you're not normally used to seeing him use a song like yours in a scene. So and it's funny because a lot of people, when they talk about when they've fallen in love with that person, their significant other or whatever, that like everything stops and feels like it's an out of body slow motion experience. And I've heard that so often, and you hear it in romantic comedies, and you read it in stories and books, and you hear, you know, your friends tell you how they met their person. And it was like that moment was literally what I think we all have heard over and over in our lives. And anyway, so obviously I'm a fan of it, but
wow. Oh,
have you
amazing.
watched have you watched Justice is Gray yet with your song?
Justice is what?
So there's another version of Zack Snyder's Justice League called Justice is Gray. And it's because when he was taken off the project, the only version of the movie he had was in black and white. And so for the last,
I didn't realize it was called that.
Yeah, so for the last 3.5 years, he had been rewatching his version of the movie in black and white. So I think 4 days after it came out, they released the black and white version. So I just think, especially that scene, which is so romantic and melancholy and deep, and with your voice in the song, like I'll be curious to hear what you think of seeing it in Justice is Gray.
Oh, well, I have to watch it then. I didn't realize that it was out. I've not seen that it's available here, but I'll have a look and try and find it. That would be really interesting to see it with because it's so colourful, that scene, to see it with that kind of monotone. Interesting.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. The movie has a completely different feeling. Even all the VFX scenes in black and white, it's really special. So you'll have to give it another watch.
I happily will. I've already watched it like 3 times, so I really like it. So yeah, definitely.
That was my next question, so you answered it. Well, I think I could talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League and that scene all day long, but I want to switch gears and talk about your other music. You talked earlier today about being nominated for a Grammy. You've got some new music coming out, so I'd love to kind of address sort of those things that are coming down the pipe. Can you talk to us a little bit about the new single or the new record that's coming out on Friday?
Yeah, so it's called Recovery. I've spoken a little bit about it. It's a very simple song. I mean, it's interesting because we've been mixing all of my songs for my album, and it's very close to being released. And when Song to the Siren came out, it almost became like this thing of, well, what would follow that song? You have to think about it making sense in the story, because I do have quite a few songs that are very poppy, and they're not like a world away from Siren, but they are very different. And it would have felt a bit weird now that so many people have discovered me through this song to kind of be aware of that journey and put something out that would kind of lead them into my new stuff. So this song it's very stripped back. It's just me and a piano, and it's a song that I wrote a few years ago, after, kind of during a messy breakup, and it kind of speaks for itself, really. It's a kind of song where we've kind of been fiddling around with music videos and visuals, and I've never come across a song which has been so delicate in terms of what you put with it really can influence it. It's kind of, I feel like when I listen to it, it's a bit of a hard listen because it takes me back to that place. And I've had a couple of times where I performed it and gone a bit too deep, where I felt a little bit like I was going to cry or break down or something. So it's a super raw song for me, and it's I think it's this kind of thing that people will be able to find themselves in and find their own like parallels and see themselves in it. And I like that about it. I think I think all songs should have room for the audience in it, always, because they're the people that hear it, and it is always about connecting. So yeah, so that's coming out on Friday, and that kind of marks the beginning, hopefully, of starting to get all the other songs out and finally have something a bit newer than the stuff that's been out for quite a while, which has been like, people have been really lovely about, but I kind of really want to have some more stuff out there and sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Song of the Siren's been kind of in your world for almost 12 months, really, when you think about it. I mean, we're hoping to release this on Thursday ahead of Friday's release for Recovery. Could you share like a lyric, a line? Now, I'm not asking you to sing. Can you share like a lyric or a line from Recovery, just to kind of tease?
Yeah, sure. I'll share the first line, which is, "You said some things you didn't mean. I lost my nerve in the disbelief."
Very cool.
Opening
and so, speaking of the other songs that are being mixed right now, do you have a goal or a deadline or a release for the full record for maybe this summer or fall?
I am trying to push my label for some kind of release date. I would like it out tomorrow, but it is important that it's all done properly.
Sure.
I think I'm hopeful that it's going to be quite soon. There's only one song that needs a little bit of creative work. Everything else is pretty much at the final stage of being mixed and mastered. So I'm really hoping that within 2 months or something, it'll, and also like Recovery coming out will hopefully kind of drive it through. So soon, I'm sorry, I can't give a date on it. It's really, I'm really frustrated that I'm getting asked by loads of people, as well as myself, daily, when is it coming out?
That's awesome. Well, we will obviously stay tuned. Well, to round out our conversation, you know, you're in Scotland. Sounds like you're going to be there for a little bit longer while you're waiting for your record label to finish mixing. What are you listening to? What have you been obsessed to listening to while you're, you know, kind of getting through this kind of awkward time in the world?
I know, yeah. What am I listening to? I'm listening to, my brother is a massive music buff fan, and every week he takes me, spend about 2 hours, and he presents me with a new artist every week. So we listened to Barbra Streisand last week, and that was great. So I've been listening to her, and then I actually don't listen to a great deal of music. I think I spend more time making it than listening. I like podcasts. I like learning things and things like that. But mainly I just, I don't know, am I listening to music? My sister sends me country music. I quite like country music. It's very chill. It's nice to drive to when you're kind of driving to the beach or something like that.
Well, if you're a podcast fan, we interviewed Russell Tovey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's an actor in the UK, and he has a really, actually, it's a very successful podcast. It's called Talk Art.
Okay, not heard of it.
Yeah, you should check it out. He's a huge art buff, and I think he just did a podcast with Pierce Brosnan on his podcast. But I mean, think of any artist, like small or big, and it's pretty incredible how thorough he and his partner on the project are kind of delving into the art world. So there's something for you to discover.
Yeah, I look forward to it. That sounds right up my street.
And speaking of art, what's behind you? Is that a creation of yours?
No, it's my sister's, because my sister's a teacher. It's a backdrop for one of their, I think it was Peter and the Wolf.
Okay.
So the kids painted a backdrop, and she's kept it in her little office space. So it's a bit funny. I'm kind of in the bosom of the hills, but yeah.
No, I love it. It's like, I guess in my mind, like while we've been talking this whole time, I keep going back to the Rocket music video and thinking, oh, you know, there's this sort of like a playful artistic side to you as an artist and creative. And so I think it works.
Yeah, I do paint. I like having a strong, like, I like being involved in every single part of putting music out. So yeah, I'll probably do some more stop motion things in the future.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending time with us today. It was so fun to hear your process. for everything that you're up to, and obviously a huge song for Zack Snyder's Justice League soundtrack. Check out Justice is Gray. I think you're gonna.
I will. And thank you for all your like really lovely questions. It's been such a nice chat.
If this is to end in fire, then we should all burn together. Watch the flames climb higher into the night, calling out Father.
I'd like to thank our guest, Rose Betts, today for joining us over Zoom for a conversation about some of her upcoming music. Of course, that hit Song to the Siren, which is now available to download on Spotify and iTunes. And don't miss the song in action in Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm Seth Travis. I'm a creative director here in New York City and also founder of Man of Metropolis and Metropolis Report.